In the beginning, there was nothing, simply darkness, an endless black abyss, but an entity sprung to life within this void. Knull, and he was happy floating within the vast nothing of reality. But this tranquility could not last forever, because light was destined to erupt, and from that moment on, Knull made it his mission to snuff out the light and return existence back to black. In 2018, Knull became the most popular new character at Marvel Comics and essentially took over the entire company, with its creator Donny Cates being catapulted to the top as one of the most powerful creators at Marvel, being allowed to write a gigantic universe-wide event with Knull at its center just a couple years after his creation. Now, how the hell did he manage to pull that off? Well, hello and welcome to Comic Drake, where I talk about comic books and my name is Drake. Let's talk about it. This scene of Venom taking on a truck is one of the coolest action shots in the character's history, but in real life, this is a nightmare scenario, especially if you don't have insurance. It's a long and annoying process to get a lawyer involved for car accidents, but if you're ever injured and don't know where to start, then Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy. And the best part is that the fee is absolutely free unless you win. Morgan & Morgan doesn't settle for lowball offers either, and over the past few months, clients involved in life-altering car crashes have received millions in compensation. There's a reason why they're the largest injury law firm in America, and they are ready to take on insurance companies no matter the size. So if you're ever injured and in an accident, you can always check out Morgan & Morgan. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/Drake. Once again, that's forthepeople.com/Drake. Thank you again, Morgan & Morgan, for sponsoring today's video, but now, let's get back to it. Donny Cates is a massive fan of 90s comics. I mean, hell, his dad literally taught him how to read through the comics of that era. And if you know anything about comics in the 90s, then you know that Venom was on top of the world, and young Donny was obsessed with him.
You were reading Venom stories at 4?
Hell yeah, I was, dude.
He sculpted his own Venom statues out of clay and would write Venom fanfics because he had so many questions about the character that were unanswered in the comics, like, where did the symbiotes come from? And when Cates was given the opportunity to write the Venom series, all of those childhood fanfics were brought to life and made canon, bringing us to Knull. Full disclosure, Knull means fuck in Swedish, and Donny absolutely knew that, with the higher-ups at Marvel not finding out until the character was already unveiled and people started having a field day about it on Twitter. With art by Ryan Stegman, who Cates collaborated with for the entirety of their Venom series, Knull made his first appearance in Venom Volume 4 Number 3 in 2018, but technically he originated 5 years prior in the Thor God of Thunder series, since Cates was a huge fan and wanted to tie his new book into it, and he got permission from the writer Jason Aaron to actually make this unnamed god be Knull. Anyway, like I said at the top of the video, the universe was originally an endless black void that was home to just Knull, but when the light of creation erupted, the Celestials were born, who sought to fill space with their own creations. Seeking to snuff out the light and return existence back to a void of nothingness, Knull manifested a sword and used it to decapitate one of the Celestials, with that head eventually becoming the mining colony Nowhere. Knull moved inside of the head and constructed a forge, taking that blade and refining it into the first symbiote, which would come to be known as All Black the Necrosword. And to this day, descendants of the Necrosword fear the fire of the forge and the loud clangs of his hammer, which is why symbiotes are weak to fire and sound. With the Necrosword by his side, Knull dubs himself the King in Black and killed many would-be gods, preventing entire civilizations from being born. But an entity of pure light energy called the Enigma Force fought back, empowering a single being at a time to become its champion, Captain Universe. One of these captains managed to fight the King in Black to a standstill, crash landing on a godforsaken planet where they were found by a man named Gore, who took All Black for himself and spent eons butchering gods, which you can learn all about in my dedicated award-winning video. Over the course of a century, Knull recovered from his fight with Captain Universe and realized that if he bonded his essence with lesser creatures, then he could draw upon their inner strength and pilot them, creating the symbiotes. Continuity police, that's a plot hole. The next page recreates the most iconic image of Knull, the one where he's sitting on a throne surrounded by symbiotes. But looky there, it's the Necrosword. Now, how does he still have the sword when we saw on the literal last page that he didn't make the symbiotes until after it was already taken by Gore the God Butcher? You can see the same blunder in another Donny Cates book where the Silver Surfer was sent back in time and Knull tries to kill him since the Surfer can create these itty-bitty baby sons. Same thing, symbiote dragon and the Necrosword at the same time, and this contradicts the perfectly established timeline. Does it actually matter though? Not really. He probably just made a different sword. Continuity cop, out. All of the symbiotes are connected through a hive mind, allowing Knull to command his army across galaxies, but his clear favorite are these dragons, two of which he piloted to Earth, where one clashed with a Norse army. Thor, the god of thunder, blasted it so hard that the King in Black was briefly severed from his hive, except for the dragon that he was currently piloting, which was defeated and then was encased in ice for centuries. This entire ordeal was mythologized into the story of Beowulf, with Thor being the titular hero, the dragon is the Grendel, and the other dragon is credited as being Grendel's mother, but that's a whole convoluted can of unimportant worms since the Big Mother actually became a whole ass other villain that had already existed in Marvel canon for years. It doesn't really matter to the story of Knull, which is what this video is about. What is important though is that now that they're unchained, the symbiotes rebelled against their creator, with billions of them all working together to lock him up and form a giant prison that's large enough to pass for a planet, keeping Knull trapped inside of their clintar, the ancient symbiote word for cage. Centuries later, the Grendel was discovered by S.H.I.E.L.D., who extracted pieces of it to form the Sim Soldier program during the Vietnam War. But because the Grendel was still connected to Knull, the god of the symbiotes was able to manipulate the soldiers into insanity. One of the Grendel's pieces took on a human form and contacted Eddie Brock years later, recruiting him to free the other fragments, but this accidentally set off a chain of events that awakened the Grendel and allowed Knull to manifest an avatar from its body all the way from the symbiote prison planet thing. With the combined powers of Eddie, Miles Morales, and a buttload of super 90s looking anti-symbiote weaponry, they managed to sever Knull's tie to the Grendel. But like, there's an evil cult that worships Knull and they managed to get one of the Grendel's pieces and fuse it with Carnage, which basically turns him into a born-again cultist. And then Carnage makes it his mission to free his god by collecting these things called codices. So whenever a symbiote bonds to a host, they leave a tiny piece of themselves behind. So by extracting the codices, Carnage is beefing himself up into the most powerful symbiote who has ever lived, which makes him more than a match for the Hulk, who was wearing Venom at the time. Because comics. Carnage rips Venom right off of the Hulk and wears it as a stylish crown, but while he was out there gathering all the little symbiote bits, the good guys were doing the exact same thing, and they powered up Eddie with dozens of codices, making him to this big powerful amalgam of so many symbiotes and hosts. During the final fight of this event though, Eddie Brock is backed into a corner because Carnage has his son, who just so happens to be half symbiote. Again, because comics. And as a result, Dannen essentially has a super codex and Carnage wants it. There are two options here. Either Carnage can kill and absorb Dannen, that would make him strong enough to awaken Knull, or Brock can kill Carnage and take Venom back, and then that will awaken Knull. Either way, the god is waking up. Eddie thinks about it for a second and then says, "Fuck the world," and kills Carnage, which allows the King in Black to bust out of his prison, and he's coming.
Phrasing. Boom.
Yeah, Knull coming became a big marketing thing over at Marvel, and they printed off this ad with the goopy white text in every book they were putting out at the time. It was certainly something. On the way over to Earth, Knull was confronted by a dude that was infected by the remnants of his previous experiments while creating the Necrosword, but Knull ripped the experiment off of him and used it to somehow get the blade back, which up until this point was lost in the future or something. Look, I'll be real, I reread this scene like 8 times and I still don't really know what's going on here. All that really matters is that now Knull has the sword back, and that is important for this video. So anyway, Knull invades the Earth and rains symbiotes on the planet, recruiting every single being that they touch into his army. But really, it's because Marvel is constantly looking for excuses to have their heroes fight each other, and also to have a bunch of new forms to sell variant covers. Ooh, look, they're nullified. Knull and his ever-growing symbiote army tear through the Earth's defenses like tissue paper. Like, the Avengers sent off the Sentry to try to take him out, but the King in Black just sucked out the Dark Void from within Bob and then tore him in half, mirroring when the Sentry tore Carnage all those years prior. Oh, and he also encased the entire planet in a dome of symbiotes. Knull promised that if Brock was handed over to him, then he would make the destruction of Earth quick and easy. So Eddie turns himself in, begging for Knull to just kill him and spare his planet, to which he replies, "I should have specified which Brock," and then proceeds to rip Venom off of Eddie and drops him from a building, killing him after a bumpy fall to the ground. You would think that with all the heroes flying around that somebody would catch him, but no. Eddie's dead. The reason that Knull wants to get his hands on Dannen is because, like I said earlier, he's half symbiote. But what exactly does that mean? Well, the hive mind birthed him from Eddie's DNA specifically so that he can kill Knull, and the King in Black figured that he could either try to sway Dannen over to the dark side or take him out to prevent the symbiote prophecy of his downfall. Victory seemed hopeless. Even Thor showing up and knocking off Knull's jaw didn't do much, because he just made a new one from symbiote goo and then stabs him in the back with the necrosword. The tide of battle was only turned because of some big moves from behind the scenes. First of all, the heroes discover that the necrosword's power is directly tied to the celestial that he had first killed with it, so some Valkyries go into limbo and sever the connection to depower the sword. At the same time, even though Eddie had died from the fall, his codex was still kicking around in the hive mind, so when Dylan joined the fight, because it turns out that he has the ability to atomize symbiotes, that created an opening for Eddie's codex to go even deeper, allowing him to hijack some symbiotes on the outside and turn into a big kaiju-sized Venom and wreck shop. But just as he was about to land a punch on Knull, he sucked back because of a mysterious energy which had resurrected him. Guided by the Silver Surfer, the Enigma Force had made its way to Earth to empower Eddie into Captain Universe, allowing him to perform a super move of taking Mjolnir and the Silver Surfer's board, which is a sword right now, and then combine them into a massive battle axe in the shape of the Venom logo. Nothing could stand in the way of Captain Eddie's path. He was making symbiote dragons drop like flies, and even when Knull sent a Celestial after him, Brock easily decapitated it with a single swing. Brock then flies over to Knull, grabs him by the throat, strips him of all black, drops him off of a building in Poetic Justice, and then flies Knull directly into the sun, finally ending his reign of terror and putting an end to the King in Black. That being said though, Donny Cates has said that Knull can't actually die, so I'm sure he'll be back eventually. And yeah, as of right now, that is all of the knowledge that I have for you. I eventually want to do a dedicated video on the King in Black event, covering all of the twists and turns within it, so if you want to see that, then let me know down there in the comments. And while you're at it, why not subscribe? But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.